was so great. Okay. I'm already crying, and that was not the plan at all. Oh my God. Whew. Thank you so much, Anna. I don't know if you did this on purpose, but I also happen to be a huge soccer football fan. So the fact that you just blended my two loves is like, whew. Anyway, um, thank you for that. Thank you to everyone at the Power of Storytelling. I am an editor, and that means I am behind the scenes. I have never addressed a room of people this large before. So, thank you. um, I spend my days trying to help other people tell stories. So it is a huge privilege to be given a chance to try and tell my own, and it's also hugely terrifying. So thank you already for being such a kind crowd to everyone who has already come through here. I also had to take my speech and put all these scribbles all over it because I've been making connections all day. And it was like, oh, shit, Jackie said that thing, and it's exactly what, so if I'm improvising a little bit, that's part of what's going on. I will also just say it is such a huge pleasure to be here in Romania. As some of us have mentioned, it's been kind of a crazy time in the US, and so it is a huge pleasure to come somewhere where the politics are very stable and everything is all worked out. So, so Anna already did this so beautifully, but I want to start just to make clear a little bit of what I make in this big world of audio. I identify as an audio journalist, and I guess although there are so many words that get used, I describe what I make as audio documentary. And in the past decade or so, for people who make the kind of work that I do, we have been on quite a journey, a good one and a bad one. And that journey has challenged me again and again to think hard about what my values really are as a journalist and as a storyteller. And so I want to tell you a little bit about that journey today. Most of what I make are in podcast lingo called limited series these days. So these are just some of the projects. I generally make narrative-driven stories. They unfold in a serialized way, across 6 episodes or something like that. I want them to be bingeable, but first and foremost, they are journalism. So my gold standard is trying to blend the best storytelling with the most ethical journalism, and I'm always reaching for that and not always achieving it, but that is the goal. So these stories include projects about sexual misconduct and how survivors find their voices. That's Believed, 13th Step. I did a series about an American political hostage in Iran and what it took to free him. That's 544 days. And most recently, I helped to edit a series called Tested, which is about the history of sex testing for female athletes and how some of them get told they're not female enough to compete. So what I do is fairly heavy stuff. It can be a little depressing. But what keeps me going is the puzzle of it all. Audio presents this puzzle. You have the voice, you have natural sound, you have music, you have archives. And the job is to put all of these pieces together in a way that helps the listener actually connect. So even when the topic is depressing, or perhaps because the topic is depressing, it's my job to give you reasons to care and to stay with the story. So I'm going to come back to that, but first, I'm amazed nobody has busted a water bottle yet. I'm sure it's going to happen. So we're all story people, right? So I'm going to tell you a little story. And it's a story that says a lot about where I find myself today. About 10 years ago, I was having this party. And it was one of those warm, cozy gatherings on a cold night, and all my friends were there. And these aren't just any friends. These were the people that I had been in the trenches with for years. So back then, I was a public radio journalist. I worked for a daily news program. And these friends and I, we had all worked together. We had covered many presidential elections and wars and school shootings. We worked for NPR, National Public Radio, which is kind of like the BBC, except with very little government funding. We would put on, different news programs throughout the day, and here's a little sample of what that sounds like.
Now it's young men are coming to Syria to kill Syrians.
I'm Aisha Roscoe. Good morning. President Trump is shaking up the Joint Chiefs of Staff and other military leadership.
Then elections in Germany, where a far-right party is on the rise, and Costanza's...
It's Morning Edition from NPR News.
So, we present the news. It's a little bit old-fashioned. It can be a little stiff. But my friends and I, we did some pretty creative stuff, too. Sometimes we took some liberties with how we covered the news. My favorite example of this, during one presidential campaign in the U.S., a bunch of politicians started using this phrase, put lipstick on a pig. And if you don't know that saying, it basically means you're trying to make superficial changes to something that is bad or ugly to convince people it's actually pretty. So, on our show, we asked a farmer to go out into a field and actually try to put lipstick on a pig.
I gather you have both a pig and some lipstick?
Yes, sir. I've got some ruby red here in my pocket, and I've got about 50 pigs here that are coming up around me. Here's a black and white one. Come here, pig. Come here, pig. Well, it's kind of like putting lipstick on a hairbrush. They don't have much lip.
So we had a bond, and we felt confident that what we were doing was important. We had tens of millions of listeners every week. We had very little competition, and the mission just felt pure and simple. We broadcast, you listen. It's public service journalism. Recently, however, we'd also started getting serious about podcasts. NPR was one of the podcasting pioneers, and we'd been doing it at this point, about a decade ago. We'd already been doing it for a while, but at that moment, podcasting was starting to blow up. And it was a huge opportunity and a great chance for our journalism. It was a chance to tell longer and deeper stories, to spend more time reporting, to let our tape breathe, as we like to say. So, these colleagues and I are all at this party. And then the front door opens. And I didn't even know it was unlocked. Nobody knocked or rang. And all of a sudden, all these people came into the room. They were quite stylish. Unlike us, we were just kind of schlumpy public radio people. These people had, slicked back hair, and they had fine clothing. And we were like, "Who are you guys?" And they were like, "Who are you?" And we're like, "Well, this is our party." And just like that, they said, "Oh, well, it's our party now." So, end of story. That is, of course, not a true story. But that is actually how it has felt as podcasting exploded in the U.S., for me at least. We had been working in this little journalistic corner with a clear, understood mission. Other journalists kind of thought we were quaint, and listeners loved us passionately, and they carried around our tote bags. And then suddenly there were all these people flooding our zone and crashing our party. And to be honest, we weren't sure what to think. This was an exciting time. We were suddenly in demand. Public radio people started forming companies. a few people became podcasting millionaires. Newspapers wanted us, and Hollywood wanted us. These new podcasting networks would call me, and they were content entrepreneurs, and I would be told, we're going to be making premium content, whatever that meant. But in order to do that, they needed people like me and my friends, because we were supposedly the masters of the craft, and they actually didn't know anything about audio. What could go wrong? So we've been on this podcasting roller coaster for a while, and that idea of premium content has pretty much died out. The industry is dominated by some huge merged up companies. And here's just to get a sample of what this journey has sounded like. Here's a sample.
From This American Life and WBEZ Chicago, it's Serial, one story told week by week. I'm Sarah Koenig.
From the New York Times, I'm Michael Barbaro. This is The Daily.
Train by day, Joe Rogan podcast by night, all day.
Hello. And welcome to My Favorite Murder. That's Georgia Hardstark. That's Karen Kilgariff. We say this every time. You guys should know this by now.
What is up, Daddy Gang? It is your founding father, Alex Cooper, with Call Her Daddy.
Today's guest is the 45th president of the United States of America, and he's currently running for president on the Republican ticket.
See me come back and win because we had a great time. We had the greatest economy in history when I was president. We had
my cousin got a boat.
Numbers. Yeah, we had the best job numbers. African American, Hispanic American.
My cousin got a boat. So, again, that was pretty selective, but that is a journey that takes us from podcasting's first true viral hit, Serial, all the way to Donald Trump talking to a comedian with a mullet. I really don't mean to suggest it's all bad. There are so many things about podcasting that are great. Maybe some of you have been a part of this. And a lot of people have benefited. Podcasting has given unprecedented opportunities to tell stories, and sometimes opportunities for people who would never have that platform otherwise. And that is a good thing. And it's benefited me. I have been one of the lucky ones. But now, 2025, the party is over. I feel like I'm standing outside that house on a cold street looking in. In the past 2 years or so in the US, podcasting and media companies have laid off hundreds, even thousands of people. So many incredibly talented producers, editors, reporters. These are my friends and my former colleagues. They are dedicated journalists, and they're people who answered that call to share their audio expertise far beyond our quaint little public radio world. It's also gotten a lot harder to get a green light or funding for the exact sorts of projects. Whoa, y'all, watch it with those glasses. It's gotten really hard to get funding, and that's for the exact sorts of projects that these companies initially claimed that they wanted. I just this week talked with a former colleague who told me a story of how she worked for the past year, and she was working on spec, so for very little money, with this big podcasting company, and she was reporting a documentary series. But as she dug into her story, the company kept pushing for facts to follow a more fictional pattern. Like, this would really make a better story if this happened. But we are journalists, and we cannot make things happen that didn't happen. They also, and I'm really reminded of this from during Amanda's talk, they said, we need a villain. And then the reporter went and actually found, apparently, quite a villain who had done some bad stuff. And then they said, oh, this is too dark. We're not going to support this project. So we get told this is a market correction. The bubble had to burst. There was too much content. It costs too much. The advertising market is fickle. And I think all those things are probably true. But what is true also is that a big victim here is journalism. Especially the kind of journalism that takes time. It's narrative, it's investigative, it upholds ethical standards, it helps listeners make sense of the world, it holds powerful people to account, and it takes you inside worlds that you might not otherwise have access to. It lets you meet people you might never otherwise meet. Helps you care about other people. I know there are people here who are far more informed than I am about the business of how podcasting works and why it has all played out the way it is. All I can tell you is what it's like to live through this boom and bust. It sucks to be told that serious work, the serious work of journalism, is exponentially less valuable than a sensationalized story, a celebrity talking to their friends, or a comedian trafficking in misinformation. But let's pause for a moment and just back up to something really, really basic. I want to ask you all a question. Yes, this is participation time. The question is, what is a podcast? What do we actually mean when we say podcast? So give that a little thought, and then I'm just going to give you about a minute to turn to someone near and just share what you thought of, and then I will yell loudly to get you to come back in a minute or so. Proceed. What is a podcast? All right. It is so fun to hear all the hubbub. Thank you for taking that little prompt. Okay, so let's all come back and let's do a show of hands. How many of you, when I asked this question, first thought of some kind of talk show? Few hands, okay. How about, how many of you went back to that origin story of podcasting and mentioned a show like Serial? Okay, we've got some there. How many of you thought of podcasts that are related to hobbies or niches like your favorite football team or movies or business? Okay, got a sample of hands. How many of you immediately thought, oh, podcast, that's how I get my news? Okay. And I could keep going, obviously. But last option, did anyone just say, podcast, that's a technical thing. It's an RSS feed, it's a distribution method, whatever audio you put into it. I got some big hands here. All right. Okay. Thank you. So I feel like actually I must have missed one great option because there were a lot of hands that didn't go up at all. Maybe that's the we don't listen to podcast hand. So this is a real head scratcher because we get told podcasting is huge, but it's not clear what we're saying is huge. There's this post I found on social media recently that I think does a great job of capturing this problem. It says, every podcast I don't listen to is called Achieving the Limit with Duff and Ween and gets sold for $300 million, while every podcast I do listen to is called The Movie Toilet and begs me to buy a t-shirt so they can eat food. So it's like, I don't get it. What's a podcast? So we have this entire industry formed around this word without a coherent or shared definition. And I've read recently that people are starting to drop the word podcast entirely. Just this week, a big new survey came out. It's a survey that's done annually, and I believe that for the first time, they did not only measure podcast listeners, they measured podcast viewers. So this word has been stretched so wide, it is almost meaningless. And if it can mean anything, maybe it means nothing. So, I've been on a journey, as I said, and I feel pretty bitter about it because it is unsettling to feel like my ability to make journalism is heavily controlled by the whims of an incoherent industry. So, let's actually list what is huge in this industry these days. Again, at least in the US. I don't want to presume that the US is exactly like all other countries. But in the US, number one, celebrities and influencers doing interviews with their friends. Number two, self-help, which I am happy to have. I need that. 3, political provocateurs and mavericks like Joe Rogan, and I assume you have some people like that in Romania. 4, videos for your audio, because obviously, what is a podcast without a video? Number 5, always on content. And that is one of those phrases that makes me fear for the future of humanity. And last but certainly not least, true crime. Speaking of true crime, I want to play you an excerpt of a podcast trailer that I found on social media a couple years ago. And it was made by the 2 excellent producers, Ian Chillag, Mike Danforth. And what you need to know is this trailer is a joke. It's fake. And it does a great job of conveying the absurdity of the industry right now.
In March 2023, 5 college students went missing from a van in the Arizona desert. Where they were found will blow you away.
New from Radiotopia, in conjunction with Wondery Media, a Gimlet Studios production in partnership with Gizmodo and Wall Street Journal Digital.
From Paramount Plus and Siemens Furniture, now at Menards.
It's Missing from a Van, Where They Were Found, a new series from One Girl Murdered Studios and PRX in partnership with Planet Money.
From Earwolf, Gimlet Media, and Lender's Bagels, Missing from a Van, Where They Were Found uncovers not just where they were found, but where they were missing from. A van.
From New Yorker.
And it goes on for about 2 more minutes. It's amazing. You should absolutely go find it. So, humor is always helpful for us to cope in hard times. So, it's good to make jokes. But it is true that I haven't really been in a joking mood. I got into audio because it was my favorite way of making journalism. But now, audio journalists are living with a dangerous mismatch. We are part of this podcasting industry. I mean, we helped create it, but the industry no longer wants us. Not because it's evil or rotten, just because business. It's a business, and it's focused on entertainment. There are a lot of good podcasts out there, like I said, but when I use the word dangerous, I mean something actually that I think Amanda also pointed out earlier. This industry is pouring more and more money into content that divides us, that misinforms us, that teaches us to retreat into our own little corners, and it has little incentive to connect us. So, what do we do? I am not a woman of business, and I cannot stand here and offer business solutions, although they are certainly needed. What I can do is make a plea. Don't give up. Don't give up on narrative audio, investigative audio, documentary audio, the substance and the storytelling. We still desperately need it. And that's because audio, when done well, can help us make all sorts of connections and help us feel connected. There's actually research about this. One study had participants connect with a stranger and also connect with an old friend. One group used text, so like they sent an email, and another group spoke through phone or video chat using their voices. And the researchers found that the people who connected through voice felt, quote, stronger social bonds than the people who connected via text. So I want to share with you some audio to help identify what some of those connections can be. So let's dim the lights a bit, and we're going to listen together. If you have your phone in your hand, put it down. Maybe even close your eyes. So I have 4 examples I'm going to play for you. The first 2 are from the podcast that Anna mentioned called The 13th Step. It's about an entrepreneur in the state of New Hampshire. There's a guy named Eric, and he had overcome years of drug addiction and had a really tough life. And he went on to create New Hampshire's largest addiction treatment company, and he got quite rich and powerful. At the same time, he was taking advantage of women, many who were also struggling with their own addictions, harassing, sexually abusing them, and then using his power to silence them. So in this first clip, you're going to hear one of those women tell a story. She talks about a time when she met Eric at a 12-step meeting. As you may know, that's a gathering of people in recovery, like AA. And after that meeting, he reached out to her on social media.
Hey, how you doing? Da-da-da-da. And I'm like, ooh, he's talking to me. I mean, I you know, and then what happened was he started to ask me for pictures of my private areas. He says, hey, you know, can you want to send me some picture of your blah, blah, you know. And at first, I remember being shocked, but you know what? Like right now in 2022, I am a completely different person. Like my whole life is completely turned around, and I'm in a wonderful, loving, respectful relationship. And I have respect for myself. And if anybody ever even tried to do anything like that to me again, it would be a whole different story. But at that moment, I obliged him. And all he said was like, oh, that's nice, or something like that. And then that was it. But here's the thing. It was like the very next day, I go to this meeting, and he's there, and he didn't even look at me. He didn't even acknowledge my presence, and I was shocked. I felt like awful. I felt like, here it is. He's like supposed to be someone that is so important in recovery and has dedicated his life to help people struggling with the things that he went through. And, you know, it was at that point in time, I'm like, who do I trust?
This is one of those pieces of audio that the very first time you hear it, you just are grabbed. At least I was. This is a woman who has experienced something that's actually kind of easy to write off. She's not well, he's a jerk. But hearing the way that she tells her story, you can feel how painful it actually is. And for me, that is a powerful connection. So, one thing audio does, creates empathy. something many people have already spoken about. Here's another thing audio can do. It's really good at calling bullshit. Sometimes we just call that fact-checking. But this clip is fact-checking on a more raw level. It is also from the 13th Step, and this is a guy, Justin, who tells us what he thought when he first heard about Eric harassing women.
I thought, this guy's a fucking maggot. What makes this guy think that this type of behavior is okay with a girl this vulnerable, right? And let me tell you something. Here I am at this moment in my life, right? I just got out of fucking prison and took a needle out of my arm, right? I have never, at this point, her telling me this, I have never done any type of recovery work or spiritual work upon myself. And even then, I still knew that this wasn't fucking okay to do, right? If you're a fucking rehab owner, why are you in contact with the clientele after they leave there? You're supposed to have boundaries.
I love that accent. So Justin tells us what's what, and that's not because he's an expert on addiction or he has some kind of science in front of him. It's because he lived it, and he's not afraid to speak the truth. I want to say one other quick thing about connections and the 13th Step, which is just this week, I got an email from someone who listened to this podcast, and it came out like 2 years ago. And we've gotten a lot of emails like this from people who, they felt moved to reach out, which is an important act to begin with, but she wanted to tell her story, and she wanted to explain how what we had done reinforced her life experience, which had felt so hard to explain to people. And she also made a suggestion to us about some language that we had used. And so she made a connection with us personally. And then when we wrote her back, she was surprised. And she said, I thought it was just a shot in the dark. I'd try and write you. But it wasn't. It was a very meaningful connection that she made. So, moving on to audio example 3. This is about the kind of connections you can feel when you really see inside someone else's relationship, kind of like being a fly on the wall. And this comes from a podcast I edited called 544 Days. It's the story of an American journalist named Jason Rezaian. And about 10 years ago, he was imprisoned in Iran as a political hostage. The podcast is about what it took to free him, but it is also a love story. So in this clip, you'll hear Jason as the narrator, and then you'll hear him talking to his wife.
Another big thing happened to me that year. I met someone, Yegi. Before I moved to Iran, I'd never really thought about marriage. But all that changed the moment I saw Yegi. This incredible and beautiful light walked into the room and grabbed all of my attention. More than a decade later, she hasn't let go. What'd you think that first night that we met?
Seriously, we have to talk about that? I mean, what did you feel?
I feel like I knew from the second that I saw you that I wanted to know you.
I mean, you were cute. A little bit disheveled. So I thought to myself, oh my God, I have to revamp his style.
How long did that take?
Forever. We're still working on it.
Well, I love hearing the affection in their voices. People talk about audio being intimate, and this feels in a good way like we're witnessing someone else's intimacy. When I shared this clip with a friend, she also pointed out that it's really humanizing. Even when we're reporting on stories about global conflict or geopolitics, our subjects are still just people. And audio does a really great job of reminding us of that. The last clip I want to play also comes from 544 Days, and it speaks to one of the challenges of narrative journalism in any medium, really, which is how to connect one person's story with bigger systems, which is maybe the opposite of what you were talking about, which is taking a huge system and finding the stories within it. So how do we take one story and say Jason, and well, why should you care about Jason? So here is one way we handled that.
I'm now part of this weird fraternity, a group that didn't choose to be together and would love nothing more than to add no new members.
I'm Sam Goodwin. I was detained on false charges of espionage in Syria for 63 days.
Kylie Moore Gilbert, imprisoned in Iran for 804 days.
I am Wang Xiyuan. I was held as American hostage in Iran's Evin prison for 1,216 days.
My name is Nizar Zakka. I spent 1,362 days as hostage in Evin prison in Iran.
My name is Alan Gross. I was held hostage in Cuba for 1,837.
So we used that audio to connect the dots, and Jason didn't need to say anything else. He could just show you that his story is one of many, unfortunately. I hope that when you listen to this audio, or when you listen to your favorite podcast, or you turn on the radio, it reminds you why this particular medium and how we practice this craft is important. And I'm going to wrap up now with 4 wishes for you. If you make audio stories, I want you to leave here feeling that what you do matters. It doesn't mean we're all precious snowflakes. We can always make our work better, but don't believe what the podcasting industry is telling you, that the only thing worth making is about murder or celebrities or divisive politics. Trust your instincts that people want more than that. If you are audio curious and you've wondered if you should make a podcast, I certainly want to encourage you, but also I want you to think hard about what it is that you want to make and what audiences or the audience you want to reach actually needs right now. And I want you to think about the dangers of believing that audio is easy or cheap or just an extension of the other things that you do. If any of you have the ability to fund journalism, or you can influence where money goes, I hope you leave here with a clear vision of just how much power you have. Your support can make the difference between journalism happening or not. And finally, here is one thing, a tiny little action that you could take. And you can do this today, you could do it later this week. If something you hear in a podcast or on the radio moves you or makes you think, or makes you feel more connected, reach out to the people who made it. Tell them. It's one tiny little action, an email, a text, a message on LinkedIn or WhatsApp, but it means the world to those of us who do this work. Thank you for listening.